All right, so we'll get started in just a second here. So yeah, we'll just give it another few seconds. Thank you to everyone who is here so far. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we do get started. I'm expecting this to take about half an hour or so. Typically when I've done this before, we are all in a room together and we are all I have lots and lots of time at the end to run through a little workshop. Obviously, that won't happen, but I do encourage you, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I will do my best to get back to you at that point. Or you're also welcome to get in touch with us or get in touch with your home library if you have further questions about the use of this resource. So let's get started. So yeah, thank you all for coming to our fourth session of Quarren training. My name is Samantha West. I'm the Client Services Librarian here at Shortgrass. And sorry, can everybody see? It doesn't look like it's showing up on my screen. Okay, we are going to check on this because there should be a video. I have it all loaded and ready to go. So I'm going to check on this and see, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to close this one and I'll try and start another one in a minute. There we go. Ha. Okay. Didn't have the right button click. This is a... Okay, so we'll get started. Once again, thank you again for coming. Sorry for the technical difficulty. As I say, my name is Samantha West. I'm the Client Services Librarian here at Shortgrass. And I am so happy for all of you for tuning in. As I mentioned at the start of this, we should be going for about 25 minutes or half an hour or so of just me talking. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I will also cop to doing this on a computer with one screen. I miss my office so much. So I might not always see your questions right away, but rest assured I will do my best to answer them during this session. So with that in mind, let's get started. So just briefly what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about what Ancestry is and what Ancestry Library Edition is. There are some slight differences between the two. We're going to talk about available informations and collections that you can access through Ancestry, searching the database, some tips and tricks for doing genealogical research generally, and some additional resources. Also, again, there will be no workshop today. This is the workshop. Typically at the end of these sessions, I like to lead a little like hands-on session, but obviously that's not going to quite work out today, but I hope you all enjoy this anyways and get something out of it regardless. So let's get started for real. So what is Ancestry? So Ancestry is the biggest and most complete source of family history information online. Now, if there are records or documents available that are going to help someone uncover their family history, they're probably on Ancestry. You may have heard of other sources for family history research that you can use online, like FamilySearch.org or MyHeritage.com. And these do all have, like, all of these free sources do have good content and are useful resources and are appealing because they're either free or they cost a lot less than Ancestry does. But none of them can actually beat Ancestry in terms of its sheer comprehensiveness. Like, there is no other resource available that has the number of records that Ancestry does. So it has access to Canadian and international historical records. They are an American company, but their records do span the entire globe. And for Canadians who would purchase a regular Ancestry subscription, which is separate from the one we're talking about today, but I did want to make note of this, there are two levels of access to Ancestry. So you can get a Canadian subscription, which gives you access to only Canadian records, or a world membership, which gives you access to everything in Ancestry's database, regardless of country of origin. Ancestry is also really great because it has allows you the option of connecting with other family history researchers. They have these super extensive discussion boards, which researchers can use to connect with other people doing research on the same people or families. And this, of course, can be super useful if you hit a wall and you just cannot find anything else on someone you're looking for. Rather than a bunch of people duplicating research and time, you're able to share, researchers are able to share what they've discovered with others and help people make connections that would otherwise have been impossible. It also includes tools for building family trees and sharing documents. So you have access to creating digital family trees. You can upload photos and documents from your own records that you're then able to share with other users, which is a feature that some people do enjoy. But the flip side of all of this, of course, is that if you've ever looked into getting a regular Ancestry subscription, it is super expensive. Paying for only 1 month of access to just the Canadian records is like 15 or 20 bucks. A full year of access to everything, so all of the international records, can cost upwards of $300. So, of course, this is part of the reason that Ancestry is so successful, right? Like, it has the option to it can offer so many resources because it can afford to buy so many. But for one person who's researching their own family, it can be exorbitantly expensive, which is where Library Edition comes in. So Ancestry Library Edition is essentially a membership that is licensed to our library or our library system instead of you as an individual. So our version of Ancestry Library System, or our account on Ancestry Library Edition, is Shortgrass Library System. And Ancestry Library Edition is great because it provides the most important of Ancestry's core services and collections, and all the records that are available to World membership holders are available to you. You can do all the research that you would be able to do as someone who owned their own paid account, but you're just using the library's account to do it. You can also read discussion among other users, but you can't participate. So those discussion boards that I mentioned at the top of the program, you can access all of that information, but if you have something really cool to share of your own, you maybe can't contribute that. There's also that family tree designer that we mentioned, the digital one. It's not available to users on the Library Edition, which for semi-obvious reasons, I think, like, you don't want people to be able to access your information. And honestly, for a lot of people, this is a fairly minor loss. A lot of people prefer to draw those out by hand or use different programs for those. You do have access to all the same help and learning resources. And the other thing I'd like to make note of is that typically, obviously we're in exceptional circumstances right now, but typically Ancestry Library Edition is only available to users who are using a library computer, like in the library, or logged on to the library's Wi-Fi. During the pandemic, if you're listening to this in the future, hello. But if you're listening to this afterwards, it's during the pandemic, Ancestry has made the Library Edition available to users at home. So that's been really, really great for people who are doing this research because, like, truthfully, what else are you going to do? So yeah, basically, Ancestry Library Edition has all the research sources and information that are there. You just don't get to use the fancier tools, but as we've mentioned, not a great loss for most people. So typical access. On your library's website, so MHPL at shortgrass.ca, Brooks at shortgrass.ca, Duchess at shortgrass.ca, Tilly at shortgrass.ca, because I bet Anita is listening. On your library's website, under the Books and More tab, you can click on All Online Resources. and click on Ancestry to be taken to its information page. So you will actually need your barcode and PIN right now. So that information, like for any other, is the same as logging into any other of our library resource. Just enter your library card barcode and PIN, and you will be taken to this page. So looks like that. You're going to want to click on this Books and More tab over here. Go over where it says I like to go to all online resources because it's the first one listed, so you don't have to scroll very far. And click on Access this resource to be taken to its landing page and asked to log in. So Ancestry has, as you can probably guess, a lot of different kinds of records. For Canadian genealogical research, there are 4 main types that you are able to search. And those are census records and voter lists, vitals records and vital statistics, military records, and immigration and travel records. And we'll just talk about a little what all of these mean. So census records and voter lists. So this includes various regional censuses. The federal census starting from about 1871 to about 1921. The Western census from 1906 and 1916. And voter lists from 1935 to about 1980. And so the thing with the census is that while many local or provincial censuses may have been taken to prior to Confederation, the first comprehensive Canadian federal census was taken in 1871 and included the first provinces of Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. As the other provinces joined, they too were included. PEI, Manitoba, BC, and the Northwest Territories, which is a vast tract of land at that point that included much of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and the current territories, were included in the 1881 census. Censuses in Canada are generally publicly released 92 years after they were taken, and so I believe the most recent one to be released was the 1921 census in about 2013 or so. At least that was what it was when I wrote this script. So starting in 1906, a special Western census was taken, and this is really cool because it covered Manitoba and the new provinces of Saskatchewan and Alberta. And since it was intended specifically to keep track of the booming population rates of those provinces in the early decades of the 20th century, especially as regarding immigrant populations, it often provides more accurate and more precise details than the federal census. Additionally, since it was taken in the middle of the First World War, the 1916 Western Census also provides super valuable information about military service. It's also important to note that you are able to access voter lists through Ancestry. And these are not formal censuses, but they do provide basic information on all Canadians who are legal to vote in general elections in a given year, including name, address, and occupation. You can find at this point the voter list from Canada from 1935 to about 1980. So like I searched my parents and found them from the 80s, which was pretty neat. You might be able to find yourself depending on your own age. So they also have what are known as vital statistics. So these are birth, marriage, and death records. And they are, for anyone who does genealogical research, the backbone of genealogical research. So because vital records are held by the province and are restricted to certain individuals, most of Alberta's vital statistics are not available on Ancestry. This does, again, vary province to province. So other provinces have provided indexes of individual records that are searchable in Ancestry, but this hasn't yet been done in Alberta. The third type of record available on Ancestry is military records. So Ancestry has a number of collections for those who served in the military at various conflicts and at various points in history. Of these, the one that is most frequently used is the Index of Canadian Soldiers in World War I. This collection provides the attestation papers for each soldiers, which were completed at the time of enlistment. So it would include things like, the person's age, where they were from, health, I think, and more detail. So there can be really, really valuable information. If you do want more detailed service records, though, you do have to make a request through Library and Archives Canada, but this can be a really, really good place to start. The fourth major type of records that are available through Ancestry are immigration and travel records. So these would include things like ship passenger lists, so 1865 to 1935, any border crossing records that we have. And public access is only available to 1935. It's also really important to note that this is a really fun one because it's just like building people's hopes up and then being like, oh, by the way. But if your family arrived in Canada prior to 1865, chances of finding records of their journey are actually very, very slim because Canada only began keeping track of immigration in 1865 in the port of Quebec City, only Quebec City. But did gradually begin to add official documentation to other ports in the following decades. So at this point, I believe public access only goes up to about the year 1935. If your family arrived after 1935, an official request has to be made by the person who came themselves or by their next of kin, and you have to make that request to Citizenship and Immigration Canada. If you're looking for ocean arrival records, the easiest thing to do is to narrow down your categories from passenger lists to Canada to Canadian passenger lists 1865 to 1935. But just to throw another wrench into this, right immediately following World War I, so the years 1919 to 1924, they actually used a separate form just to keep track of that kind of that much immigration, that volume of immigration. So there is a separate collection for those years, which you can search as well if you do have family who might have come over at that time. The last place I would encourage you to check is that depending on where your ancestors were coming from and where they were going, it's also possible that they landed in an American port like New York. So checking American passenger lists and border crossings is something you might want to try as well. So those are the four main types of records. I also would like to point out Ancestry has this thing called card catalog. And so the card catalog is a complete searchable listing of all the collections that Ancestry provides access to, because those four main types do not begin to cover the volume of information that is contained on Ancestry. So this is a searchable listing, and you're able to filter by type of collection, by location, by date, and by language. Filtering by location Canada will provide you with information about every record collection pertinent to the country, and then you're actually able to further narrow it down by province if you choose to do so or need to do so. So a couple of collections that might be of interest to you here include the Canada City and Area Directories of 1819 to 1906. So that includes things like address listings and housing information, and the Canada Obituary Collection, which is fairly self-explanatory. Neither are comprehensive, but they may have some information that would be useful to your search. So the little example I like to give is that in theory, using these filters should let you find, for instance, all of the available English language military records for the province of British Columbia between 1887 and 1940. So you can get fairly specific with it, which then you later go in to do it though, and you find out like, wow, this is not specific enough at all. So to access that card catalog, you're going to want to click search on the top menu bar and then click on card catalog, and it brings up this listing of all the different collections that are available to you. So if you look at it, you can see things like the 1911 England census, the 1850 United States federal census, the registration and marriage index for like the past 100 years in England and Wales. So there's all kinds of information like from across the globe. It's available to you through Ancestry. So what do these collections look like though? What information is contained in them? So Ancestry has different sections, so that would include things like stories, memories, and histories, and these are essentially mentions of your ancestor in places that are not necessarily quote-unquote official records, but can provide you with some insight into their lives nonetheless and sort of help you flesh out their story. There we also have newspapers and publications. So this is where you might turn up some surprising information or stories about your ancestors in old publications. Again, really good for helping you flesh out their life. It's also a really great spot for sourcing print copies of obituaries, marriage notices, and similar reports. And to really build up the picture. Legal and financial documents are also sometimes available through Ancestry, and this would include things like tax records if you want to find out how many goats somebody owned, um, prison records if you want to know if they did time, wills, and other legal records that can provide you with some information on your ancestor. So I actually really like the location thing and wanted to point it out specifically because this is really great if you want to get an idea of the scope of the records available for any given place, which can help you then in turn know what kind of information you'll be able to find about a person from that place. So this is what it looks like, and you can click on one of these pins and it'll tell you what that record is and like what information is available there. Okay. So we're going to start talking about the actual search process now. So before you search, there are a few things that you can do to sort of guarantee that you'll have a more successful go of it, basically. So the really important thing to do is gather everything you know in one place. You know, help yourself figure out and identify what it is you don't know by compiling everything that you do have. And the more you have to start, the easier it'll be to discover more. So definitely another really crucial part of this puzzle is to ask family members to help you fill in the blanks, especially your older generations. It's really important to get to our older folks first because you want to make sure you're doing that before the facts and the stories that they know are lost. That said, even if that option is not available to you, definitely ask everybody. You know, ask your siblings or your cousins or even your nieces and nephews, because people pick up different bits of information and remember different things. So even if they're your age, quiz them, because you want to make sure that you can gather as much knowledge as you can from everybody who might have picked up a piece of that. Sketching out a rough family tree can be really helpful because it allows you to visualize what you have and identify what's missing. And then consider the following sets of questions. So, did they perform military service? Do you know was it during a particular conflict? If they served in World War I, for instance, when and where did they enlist? What units did they serve in? Do you know what country or front they served in? Were they injured? Did they ever earn any medals? All of these can be starting points or jumping off points for research. Did they immigrate? If they immigrated, you'll want to compile information about where they originally lived, when they left their home country, what port they left from, what ship they took, when they arrived in Canada or wherever they went, and what port they arrived at. Keep in mind that they may have been traveling under names as well that were spelled differently than they would later have been in Canada, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. When and where were they born? So if you know the church the family attended, the religious institution the family attended, you may want to go looking for christening records and birth registration. And finally, when and where did they marry? What denomination were they? What religion were they? Where did they get married, and who stood as witness for this wedding? They're all questions that can help you put together pieces of the puzzle. So, actually getting started. The first thing you're going to want to do is when you click on that search page, the search page, you're going to want to enter literally every little scrap of information you have. The more that you have, the better. And the more that you have will help you get a stronger set of results back. So on the search page, it'll ask you to enter things like the first and the middle name, but places your ancestor might have lived. You're also able to add major events in their life, so their birth, but also their marriage, their death. You can add things like their occupation. If you have a confirmed family member link, you're able to add that too, so you can see how incredibly powerful this database is. So for the example that I always use, I use one of my dad's family members who moved over here, because I know that I'll be able to find something super accurate about it. So also point out too that I really like Ancestry because it lets you see like special collections, so it'll show you things that on this page other databases in their collection that you might want to try. So when you search, the initial search will return that I did for this example returned 11,600 results, and most of them are not going to be relevant to us. But there are ways that we can do this to sort of play around with our results and sort of see if we can get something that's a little bit more useful. So you'll see that they have this set of sliders in the top left corner that'll allow you to narrow your search for things like alternate spellings of names. So maybe there was an extra O in there somewhere. Maybe, somebody went by Rob. Like, it's really easy to play around with that until you get the results you want. You can also go through and view your results by category. So if you only want to see like newspaper records or something, like newspaper records, you're able to look at those. Or you can just browse through this list here and see what these records might unfold. So yeah, as you can see, there's a lot to search for. The first one is a grave, so we're going to go through and click on that one. And when you open a results page in Ancestry, it typically looks like this. So this is a breakdown of the available information in this record. So it'll show you where the record is located, tells you what information you're going to find there. There's more information down here about the particular source of the record to tell you like why they have that information and like what information you can find there generally. And it also has over here the algorithm will pull some suggested records for you to browse through that it thinks might be relevant to your search. The last thing I'd like to point out is you are able, in normal circumstances, to send your records home to yourself for future browsing. So again, typically when you're using Ancestry, you are not able to use it on your home device. You have to be in the library space or using library Wi-Fi. So there's a couple of things that you can do, though, to make sure that you're not losing all of this information and having to start from scratch every time you open the site. The first thing you might want to try is send the record home to yourself, so you're able to access it later on your home computer. It's something to note is that you won't actually be able to access the rest of the Ancestry site if you're not on your library computer, but you will still be able to open that record up and just print that single individual record. You're also able to view it as a printer-friendly document, which I find really, really handy. You can open the record on a printer-friendly page that you're either able to literally print from the library computer or to save it as a PDF. Practices for this, of course, will depend on what browser you're using. But the thing I really want to highlight about this is that it's not like adding things to your online shopping cart. You actually have to physically do this, go through this process with whichever or every single record that you would like to keep. You have to remember to do that. And I want to make this very clear. If you don't remember to do that, you're going to have to go back in and find that later. And we all know that that can be a massive pain. So the old idea that you should be saving after you write every paragraph, save after you download every record, please. So yeah, that's important to note. And of course, again, you'll always be able to find that link to save it in the bottom right corner. And it'll pull up a record that looks like this. So just a few tips and tricks about searching or performing genealogical research. The big one, of course, is to be very flexible with your dates. The further away from an event that you get, the more likely it is going to be that people misremember the details. It's really, really common when performing genealogical research to see people's ages and the years of major life events changing from document to document. So, if a census taker came around and somebody else in the family or, a neighbor answered the questions about the household, it's actually very reasonable to assume that they might not have remembered the precise dates for everyone's birth date. And of course, as well, the further away you get from a historical event, like a wedding or a christening, the greater the possibility of error, somebody just misremembering the date. It's really, really useful to you when you're going through it to not be stuck on, oh, this person was born in 1926, and I will not hear any hard tell about it, especially, and this does hold true the further back in time you get as well, right? So Don't discount something just because the birth date is a couple years off of what you thought it was or what you think it is. Be really creative with your spelling. So, spelling of names is actually not, both given and family, has not always been standardized. And depending on things like accents and what the record keeper was used to hearing, variations might exist. Um, Something that's useful to do is to say the name out loud and try and work out all the different ways it might be spelled phonetically. Vowel sounds, especially, were subject to alterations due to different accents and what the record creator was used to hearing. So, vowels, especially, were often recorded in different ways, while consonants and hard sounds tend to be more stable than vowels. So, just like with dates, be really flexible and don't get hung up on what the current spelling is or what it was supposed to be. And just pursuant to that, Ancestry has this really neat feature called wildcard letter replacements. And when you're searching for somebody's name, this will help you sort of expand and be more flexible with your dates. So that you can use a question mark symbol if you're unsure of a single letter in a name, or an asterisk to replace up to 6 characters. And these can be used in combination, which can be really, really handy depending on the type of name that you're looking for. So you probably won't want to need to use one if your last name is Smith, but if you have a particularly Eastern European last name, it can be really, really useful to use. Also, make sure that you are double checking your transcription against the scan of the original record if you're looking at a document. So just because of the sheer volume of records in Ancestry's database, a lot of the transcription work is actually outsourced internationally, and errors tend to abound when it comes to accurately describing what is on the record. And this, of course, is because a lot of the people who are working on these transcribing these records don't speak English as a first language, and also because a lot of the time historical handwriting is incredibly hard to read. I'm sure we've all seen the letters and just peered at them just uncomprehendingly. So even for any native English speaker, it can be really difficult to parse out. So with that in mind, be patient and just make sure you're checking back and forth between the typed version and what is on the actual record image, because it can be very, very easy if you're not doing this to miss out on valuable information just because of poor transcriptions of the database. And the thing we keep coming back to is make sure you're talking to your family. They are absolutely your best resource, and it's a really great project to work on together, especially now given everything that's going on. I think it's really useful to have a project and find new and unique ways to connect with people. So this can be one way to do that. I also just wanted to highlight very briefly some additional resources. So Ancestry.com, first off, has a learning center that's actually really, really full of useful articles and guides that go into much greater detail than I'm able to on how to effectively perform family history research using Ancestry. They are able to help walk you through the different kinds of records, how to read these records, and how to really take your research to the next level. So if you're feeling stuck or frustrated, definitely take a look through their learning center. You'll often be able to find the answer you were looking for in one of their articles or guides. A couple of other things I wanted to point out. If you search for Ancestry's Library Edition LibGuide, it's basically a collection of helpful tutorials that people have accumulated in on a site. And if you go on YouTube, actually, and search for Ancestry Library Edition, there are some really, really handy tools on there for using the resource. And lastly as well, another thing I would like to point out is our Gale Courses resource actually does have a genealogy basics course, which leads you through the process of getting started with genealogical research. It's free if you have a library card. And the courses run about 6 weeks. They usually take about 3 hours to do per week. They upload 2 sessions, and you can basically do it at your own pace. You can return to it as often as you need to, and it's a really, really great tool that's available to you as well. So, with that in mind, That is basically it for me. I will leave this up for another couple of minutes just to see if anybody has any comments or questions. If you do have something that you think of later, definitely feel free to get in touch with us via this Facebook page. Definitely feel free to reach out to your local library staff. I'm sure they'll be really happy to help you. And thank you so much for coming.